Wadau wa sekta ya elimu kutoka mataifa ya Afrika Mashariki wanakutana jijini Nairobi kujadili njia za kuimarisha masomo ya mitandaoni katika shule na vyuo kwenye kanda hii ikiwemo taifa la Kenya. Wazungumzaji katika hafla hiyo ya siku mbili ya Kenya Adtech Summit 2023 wanasema kuwa licha ya kuwepo maendeleo kiasi katika eneo la Afrika Mashariki, bado kuna mapengo mengi katika juhudi za kuafikia na kuimarisha masomo ya kidijitali. Lydia Mreithi ni naibu mkurugenzi wa kituo cha masomo ya hesabu, sayansi na teknolojia Afrika Semestia.
We reflect on the incredible journey we have undertaken and development in the field of education, and particularly our major is STEM education. And let us work together to ensure that every student, regardless of their background, has access to quality education.
Huku kongamano hilo likiingia awamu ya pili mwaka huu, mwandalizi wake Bi Jennifer Otieno aliitisha ushirikiano na ukakamavu kwa wahusika ili kuhakikisha hakuna yeyote atakayeachwa nyuma katika safari ya kukumbatia masomo ya kidijitali Afrika Mashariki.
What it takes is really dedicated efforts to empowering the leaders of learning, which are our parents, our teachers, and our school leaders, to make sure that they have the skills and confidence to be able to use technology effectively to lead learning in schools or in homes. We also need localized tools and content that are aligned with our government's curriculum and actually make sense in the contexts in which they're being used. So if digital infrastructure is a challenge, how do we use low-tech interventions to meet the needs of the learners in that community?
Akihutubia kongamano hilo kwa njia ya mtandao, mkurugenzi wa kituo cha kimataifa cha kufuatilia nguzo za elimu GEM Bwana Manos Antonainis alishauri juu ya umuhimu wa kuwa na ushahidi kamili ili kuchochea maamuzi ambayo yatahakikisha masomo ya kidijitali yanaafikiwa na watu wote. Wazungumzaji mbalimbali katika kongamano hilo walisisitiza umuhimu wa kubuni miingiliano ambayo itasaidia katika kuafikiwa kwa masuala yote kiviwango kwa minajili ya kutambua mahitaji ya kila mkufunzi na mwanafunzi wake katika kuendeleza masomo ya dijitali Afrika Mashariki.
Everyone has the right to learn and prosper. For the Center of Innovative Teaching and Learning, we believe that technology will help improve the quality and relevance of education to help prepare youth to look for dignified and fulfilling jobs. When you start talking about policy stage, are our voices heard? Are the voices of the people who will use the education technology out in the rural areas, out in the villages, out in displaced areas, are their voices being heard?
Kongamano hilo lililoanza tarehe 20 hadi 21 Septemba linaazimia kuwaleta pamoja wahusika wa elimu ya kidijitali kutoka taifa la Kenya na Afrika Mashariki kwa ujumla ili wapate nafasi ya kujifunza kutokana na maendeleo makubwa yaliyopigwa na taifa la Kenya katika kushughulikia sekta ya dijitali kwa ujumla. Kwa mtazamo wa dira kutoka jijini Nairobi nchini Kenya, jina langu ni Robert Wanyonyi.
So I'd like to welcome us to the second Kenya Adtech Summit 2023, and we are so glad to have you here. For this particular one, I believe we are all going to still make use of evidence and at the same time be able to collaborate for the future.
As we convene for the second time at Semestia for the Kenya Adtech Summit, we reflect on the incredible journey we have undertaken and development in the field of education, and particularly our major is STEM education. And let us work together to ensure that every student, regardless of their background, has access to quality education.
It's everyone in this room that makes this community valuable and makes it worth showing up for. So thank you. You are here because you are advocates for evidence-based technology, for the use of that technology to support equity and inclusion, to prepare young people for the future, and to do it in a way that is cost-effective and resilient. Everyone in this room is working for that effort. So I hope over the next 2 days, you spend time meeting new people that you've not met before, trying to understand and build empathy with the other people in this community.
this is what it is. It's bringing our expertise together to create a bigger, ripple effect of improving education outcomes. Equitable and inclusive policies and regulations are necessary for technology usage. Everyone has the right to learn and prosper. For the Center of Innovative Teaching and Learning, we believe that technology will help improve the quality and relevance of education to help prepare youth to look for dignified and fulfilling jobs. When you start talking about policy stage, are our voices heard? Are the voices of the people who will use the education technology out in the rural areas, out in the villages, out in displaced areas, are their voices being heard?
Hello, my name is Jennifer Otieno, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Adtech East Africa. We are the host of the Kenya Adtech Summit, which is an annual event for the diverse members of our EdTech ecosystem to come together, to share ideas, to learn from one another, to analyze the most recent evidence, and to chart a way forward of how to improve technology-enabled teaching and learning in Kenya. Sure. Okay, so the goals for the Kenya Adtech Summit 2023 are essentially to create a coordinated movement around education technology in Kenya. So we have a number of diverse players within our ecosystem, from government to digital infrastructure providers, to edtech entrepreneurs, practitioners in schools and communities, researchers, and more. And this opportunity allows us to align efforts, come together to create that coordinated movement. The second goal of the summit is to look at the evidence and make sense of that evidence for how we do our work, catalyzing a new way of working that's grounded in research and knowing what works on how to use technology effectively for teaching and learning. Our third goal is really about rebuilding the relationships that allow us to collaborate more effectively as an ecosystem. So what we want to do is create clarity and empathy for the different members of our ecosystem to be able to do our work together more effectively.
My question would be, it appears there's a problem inculcating digital learning into the classroom. What is the problem?
So it takes a lot to actually make digital learning work. The way that the government sees this is there's 4 building blocks, and they've outlined this in the ICT and Education and Training Policy of 2021 that was developed by the Ministry of Education. They consider the 4 building blocks to be content, capacity building, policy, and digital infrastructure. So all of those different pieces need to be aligned in order to make digital learning work in schools across the country. They also, within the policy, outline key themes that are really important, including innovation, evidence, but also equity, access, inclusion, and a few other themes that really guide our work as an ecosystem. So what it takes is really dedicated efforts to empowering the leaders of learning, which are our parents, our teachers, and our school leaders, to make sure that they have the skills and confidence to be able to use technology effectively to lead learning in schools or in homes. We also need localized tools and content that are aligned with our government's curriculum and actually make sense in the contexts in which they're being used. So if digital infrastructure is a challenge, how do we use low-tech interventions to meet the needs of the learners in that community? If we have more sufficient and reliable digital infrastructure, we can push the envelope and use more high-tech tools to actually learn as we continue to build a more equitable system. So there's opportunities across our ecosystem to figure out how to do this better. I think the other challenge is, we talked about this in our opening plenary this morning, but evidence continues to be a challenge. There's not enough evidence across the globe, but also here in Kenya, about how we understand the ways in which technology has been proven to really make a difference. So if you want to use SMS for learning, how matters, not just the tool you're using, but how it's implemented, how the capacity is built of those who are using it, and how we actually build the systems for feedback loops that can make sure that the voices of the end users are actually integrated into the product development process itself.
So when you talk about EdTech, but in some communities it is pastoral, some are refugee communities.
Absolutely.
So how, now that you've spoken about equity, how are you applying these technologies in bridging the gaps in the education system?
Great. Oh, sorry. Here. Okay. Yeah. So I think it's really important for us to understand that context matters and the deep understanding of that context. So one of the workshops we've hosted at the summit this morning has been around work that's being done in pastoralist communities in Kajiado, how they're using digital tools to actually support parents in those communities to engage in learning at home through the use of digital tools. They've been collaborating with government, they've been collaborating with teachers, they've been collaborating with the National Parents Association and with a number of community-based organizations who already have the trust of those parents and communities. And so basically there's not one way to make this work. What we have come to realize is that it's really about going and working with the local communities for them to be part of the solution generation process. For those that are building products and solutions, they may not have that deep contextual knowledge, so they need to work in partnership with those end users, the learners, teachers, and parents on the ground to actually build solutions that work. And they need to have the right feedback loops, gathering evidence to actually continue to evolve the more they get to understand what actually works for those communities. Same thing for refugee communities and all of the different contexts in which we need to solve for in Kenya.
You talked about inclusivity. What are you doing in order to accommodate learners with special needs?
Absolutely. So one of the themes for Adtech Summit is around inclusion. So we have 5 goals that are grounded again in the government's policy for ICT in education and training. The first goal is around foundational learning. So this is literacy, numeracy, and social emotional skills. The second is around skills for the future. So this is about how do we prepare young people to be able to thrive in a digital society, but also to be able to solve the problems of the future. The third goal is around equity and inclusion. So really thinking about how do we ensure that all of our interventions are accessible, affordable, and actually built to respond to the different needs of learners. The last 2 that we focus on are leaders of learning, so capacity building for teachers, parents, school leaders, and those that sit at sub-county and county levels that support those teachers in the classroom. And then the last is about digital infrastructure and enabling, and broadly an enabling environment. So really about evidence-based policy and reliable digital infrastructure as those support any of the other pieces to happen. So within that goal 3 area that's focused on equity and inclusion, what we've been doing is hosting a series of conversations on how do we actually make the products and tools that we're building more equitable, looking at all of the different types of diverse learners, especially learners with disabilities. One of the amazing things that came out of the GEM report was done by UNESCO that looked across the globe about what works in technology-enabled teaching and learning was actually that the work that's being done around assistive devices to provide support specifically to learners with disabilities has been one of the bright spots across the world. Technology makes a huge difference when it comes to actually supporting those learners and meeting their needs. It's especially a huge support to teachers also when we have teachers that are supporting integrated classrooms, they have learners with special needs that are working within their classrooms, having tools that can support them to make sure they're meeting those learners where they are is an incredible support to teachers as well. So this is an area of focus for us. We're figuring out how to do it better. Tomorrow, we actually have one of our partners, the Regional Education Learning Initiative. They will be presenting an equity in EdTech framework that they've been building with support of EdTech East Africa and a number of other players to actually think more broadly about within a single solution, how do you make it more equitable, but also at an ecosystem level. How do we make sure that we work together to close any of those gaps and bring in the partners when needed so that they can make sure that everyone has access when any intervention's being implemented. Yeah.
My final one
Sure.
be on how well aligned is this, what you have, how well aligned is it to the CBC?
So we encourage all of the EdTech solutions within our community to be grounded in two things. One, the education policy of the country. It has to be aligned with what the government says is the way forward, especially when it comes to teaching and learning using technology. The second is that it has to be any content that's being built, any assessments that are being built need to be aligned to CBC as well. So it means transforming the way that we think about building our solutions so that they actually map to all of the competencies that are being built through CBC, as well as the ways in which NEC and our other partners are guiding better assessments, competency-based assessments as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. I guess. Okay, he also would like to know, following last year's summit, which was the first.
Yes.
Have your expectations been met now that we are congregating again?
Oh, good question. So we've done a few things between last year's summit and this year's summit. One is that coming out of last year, we had a series of conversations on how to collaborate more effectively as an ecosystem. One of the things that we created was how-to guides. So, for example, how to collaborate with media, how to collaborate with the governments, how to collaborate with the academia and the research community. We came up with these guides, and actually then tomorrow at the summit, we'll have an opportunity for this group of amazing experts to give feedback into that process. And then we release those as tools that should hopefully foster greater collaboration within our ecosystem. The other thing we've been doing, as I mentioned, we're hosting a series of conversation around these collective action goals. So those goals were born at Kenya Adtech Summit 2022. We've hosted a series of conversations online and in person since then. And now we're bringing those back to the community. Tomorrow's sessions will focus deeply on how do we understand the realization of those goals and how do we get more people involved in that process. The next step in that will be to now go regionally. So we'll be taking some of those ideas, those tools to regional summits. We'll be going to Kisumu next. We'll be going to North and Northeast. We'll be going to Coast and to Rift Valley. And we'll basically be engaging more of the local communities to get involved in this process, so we figure out, again, how can we continue to work together more effectively to take our work forward. So I think we've started a process. We understand that that process is not solved in a day like this, or even in a year, but we're dedicated and committed to continuing to bring this community together over the next few years so that we can continue to make progress along that journey.